Hours of service. As an operator of a commercial motor vehicle, or CMV, you are subject to the federal requirements pertaining to hours of service. These regulations aim to protect your safety by countering driver fatigue. You can find an extensive summary of these regulations among the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations. In general, J.B. Hunt falls under these regulations because the company operates vehicles in interstate commerce. These vehicles meet at least one of the following criteria. The vehicle weighs more than 10,000 pounds. The vehicle has a gross weight rating or gross combination weight rating above 10,000 pounds. The vehicle is transporting hazardous materials in a quantity requiring placards. 49 CFR Part 395, Hours of Service for Drivers. This part details rules and regulations that apply to all motor carriers and CMV drivers. It outlines maximum driving times, records of duty status requirements, supporting documentation types, and retention periods. It may be helpful to think about the hours of service requirements in three categories: driving time, driving window, and breaks and resets. Driving time. The 11-hour rule. As a CMV driver, you may drive a maximum of 11 hours following 10 hours of off-duty time. The 11 hours of drive time are completed within the 14-hour driving window, a subject that we will visit next. You may not drive more than 11 hours following 10 consecutive hours off-duty. All time accumulated on the drive line, or line 3, counts toward the 11-hour rule. If you drive for 3 or more hours beyond the 11-hour driving limit, it may be considered an egregious violation and you could receive the maximum civil penalty. The FMCSA can levy penalties on a driver or motor carrier of up to $16,000 per violation, depending on severity. Driving window. The 14-hour rule. As a CMV driver, you have a 14-hour window to complete your driving time. Your 14-hour window, also known as a tour of duty, begins as soon as you go on duty for the first time. Once the 14-hour limit is reached, you cannot drive anymore. You must wait for the arrival of your next driving window before you are allowed to drive again. A new driving window can begin after 10 consecutive hours are logged off-duty or in the sleeper berth. Of course, the split sleeper provision is an additional rule that alters this pattern, but we will cover that provision later in this module. The 70-hour rule. Similar to the 14-hour rule, which limits your daily driving time, the 70-hour rule limits your total driving time within an 8-day period. You may not drive after having been on duty a total of 70 hours during a consecutive 8-day period. All time accumulated in driving status and in on-duty not driving status counts toward the 70-hour rule. Breaks and resets. The 10-hour rule and the 30-minute break. CMV drivers are required to take a 10-hour break. This 10-hour break must be logged as off-duty or sleeper berth. The break is required at the close of your 14-hour driving window. After completing the 10-hour break, you will again have 11 hours of drive time available. During your 11 hours of drive time, you are required to take a 30-minute break. The 30-minute break is required following 8 cumulative hours of drive time. The 30-minute break requirement differs from the 10-hour break in that the 30-minute break can be logged as off-duty, sleeper berth, on-duty not driving, or any combination thereof. This means that during your 30-minute break, you can complete other non-driving tasks if needed. The 34-hour rule. A driver may restart his or her 70 hours after being off duty for 34 or more consecutive hours. The 34-hour restart can be used at any point to regain a full 70 hours of work time. Both rules, that is, the 10-hour rule and the 34-hour rule, act as a reset to your driving windows. Be sure to check the hourly amount of your available drive time each day to meet these standards. The split sleeper berth provision. This provision allows you to split the mandatory 10-hour break into 2 separate rest periods, one for 7 hours and one for 3 hours, or one for 8 hours and one for 2 hours. The provision allows for either combination, so long as their total amount constitutes 10 hours of rest. The longer rest period will be logged as sleeper berth. The shorter rest period will be logged as either sleeper berth or off-duty time. Neither period will affect your 14-hour driving window. Let's now review a few exceptions. The CMV short haul exemption. The short haul exemption applies to drivers who drive shorter distances and fewer hours. Such drivers may not be required to keep logs. To qualify for the exemption, drivers must not be on duty for more than 14 hours. They must operate within a 150 air mile radius, and they must start and end their day at their work reporting location. The adverse driving conditions exception. This exception allows drivers to extend their 11-hour driving time and 14-hour driving window by as much as 2 hours in the event that unforeseen adverse driving conditions arise. Personal conveyance. Personal conveyance is not considered part of your 11 hours of drive time. Time spent operating a CMV for personal conveyance may be recorded as off-duty time only when the motor carrier has relieved the driver from work and from all work-related responsibilities. Again, you can find an extensive summary of these regulations among the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations. Keep in mind, the hours of service regulations exist to protect the safety of CMV drivers and that of the motoring public. As a commercial driver, it is critical that you plan your day as much as possible to account for these important rules of the roadway.